You're listening to The Streaming Wars, the podcast that discusses all of the latest happenings regarding your favorite streaming services. Find out which service is winning the war this time around.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of The Streaming Wars. I am Dustin and Tony is with me, and we are covering all of the news related to streaming services and the content that you find on them from March 19th through March 24th. We have a little bit of news here or there based off of everything going on in the world. News is not something that's been focused on entertainment as of late, but we do have some updates based off of our topic from last week with the coronavirus and how it's affecting the streaming industry. So we're going to get to that in a little bit. But first, let's get into the news rundown. So we have no news for Netflix, which is quite surprising because I can honestly say I don't remember there being one episode anytime since we've started that there hasn't been news for Netflix. That's how it is, and that should give you an idea of how little amount of news there is. So, moving right over to Prime Video. Prime Video has announced that they are now offering viewer profiles. Now, if you're questioning what exactly a viewer profile is, it's the same thing you probably have on every other service that you subscribe to. Netflix, Hulu, CBS All Access, the Apple TV Plus, Disney Plus, they all have some sort of user profile system where you have a certain amount of content that you are listing, you have attached to yourself. It shows what you watch, things like that, what you've already watched compared to, your spouse or your roommate or your kids. It separates the content, and for whatever reason, Prime Video is just now getting around to adding viewer profiles.
This is about time that they have done this. I am so happy that they're releasing profiles so that I can use them and separate what me, my wife, and my kid watches. Because on Disney Plus, I get recommended all the Star Wars and the Marvel stuff, and I love it. My daughter gets recommended like Frozen, all this stuff, and I don't get to see her recommendations, and it makes me happy. So I'm so glad that Prime Video is cutting this stuff out now, is doing viewer profiles now.
Yeah, and it's really important because one of the things that I didn't really think about but was brought up in the article was that, without viewer profiles, you cannot restrict the content that's actually available. And because Prime Video actually attaches to Movies Anywhere, any content that you have bought in digitally anywhere else is all linked to your Amazon profile. So you could have a kid come in and start watching stuff that's rated R just because there is no restrictions put in place because of viewer profiles. So it's smart, but it's also really, really late. They probably should have done this a long, long time ago. So over to Hulu. Hulu has launched on Xfinity Flex. Xfinity Flex is the box that Xfinity offers. It's very similar to a Roku or a Apple TV or a Amazon Fire TV. Very similar in the sense of it has a variety of different apps that are available for streaming purposes. It does not have as many apps as basically any of those other ones that I just listed off, but Hulu was just added to it, and that was one that when the box launched, I believe at the beginning of January, they said Hulu was coming. There's still plans for a variety of the other big apps like Disney Plus, but that has not happened yet. No news for CBS All Access. Apple TV Plus. The only news for Apple TV Plus is that there is a new show, or a new series that is on Apple TV Plus that is free. You do not have to have a subscription in order to view it, and it's Oprah talking all about COVID-19 and doing interviews with celebrities. I know that one of the episodes she interviewed Idris Elba, who is being quarantined because he has actually contracted the coronavirus. So it's a free series. Obviously, it's there for a specific purpose, which is, she's best known for doing a talk show. And in this time, why not have it for free, I suppose?
Dustin, I hate to be Captain Skeptic here, but this really is just in a very horrible, dark view, just free advertising for the Apple TV Plus service. You have Oprah Winfrey, who is just famous. You're getting her what she does best, a talk show. Basically, you get Oprah Winfrey on your phone, no subscription, and it's about the biggest news topic that's going on right now. Yeah, I hate to be that guy, but this is awfully fantastic advertising for Apple TV Plus. There's no better way to say that. That's what this is. I mean, it's entertainment, yes, and it's good to talk about, yes, and educational, yes, but at the end of the day, it's the reason why Apple TV And that department brought Oprah in is to help push the series. And unfortunately, they will do this with this series. So hate to play my skeptic hat, but that's kind of how I'm seeing this right now.
Yeah, and you're definitely not out of the realm of possibility here. I mean, clearly, Oprah has a deal with Apple TV Plus to create content. She has her book club show. She's a producer for a variety of other projects that are in the works for the network. But this is clearly one of those situations where she is best known as a talk show host. And when you have something as big as what's currently happening, getting her to have a show, and of course having it on this service, it definitely is going to bring some eyeballs to the service, which is
for free.
Yeah, for free.
Yeah, and she's people trust her. People look up to her. They find her calming and relaxing, and not like in a bad way. Just they feel safe when they watch Oprah, and you get that for free. It's not like they have to pay for Apple TV subscription. It's the free part to me it's like, oh, skeptic cat, let me see it.
From Oprah's perspective, she's just doing what she's probably doing, but from Apple's perspective, it's definitely a way to bring people in, especially by making it free, like you said. All right, so Disney Plus, there's a couple of different things. One, they've delayed the launch in a couple of different countries. Obviously, as you know, Disney Plus was supposed to launch in Europe actually as of today, March 24th, and it actually was announced that it was also supposed to launch in India, and first it was announced that it was going to be delayed in India. My understanding of the reason why was because of it has to do with the packaging that they were actually planning on doing with Hotstar and Disney Plus. Hotstar is very popular when it comes to cricket, and because of everything going on in the world, cricket has ceased all games. So they're concerned, not necessarily Disney Plus, but the article that I read was presenting it as they're concerned about the potential of packages being put together as Disney Plus, basically an add-on to Hotstar, because the majority of people who are getting Hotstar are doing it because they have a lot of streaming rights to cricket games in India. So that's what's going on in India. It was also announced that France, the launch of Disney Plus has been delayed to April 7th at this point, but it did launch, however, in most of the rest of the European countries that were actually supposed to launch today on the 24th. In the UK specifically, that has happened. However, there was a unique thing that was brought to my attention from Twitter, and then Tony and I were talking about it before the show. But Tony, what's going on with the release schedule of The Mandalorian?
Oh, man. To my fellow streamers that are in the European Union, I am so sorry. The Mandalorian is being released weekly, except, the first two episodes are being dropped on the day of release, but after that, it's going to be dropped weekly like it did in the United States. So in the United States, that was the original airing, was every single week, which is great when it's the first time out, I guess. That's palpable, but when it's already been out for months, and then you finally comes to your market, and you've been saving basically your money for me, The Mandalorian was a selling point for Disney Plus. So if you're like me, it's like you've been ready for this. You didn't want to torrent it because it's illegal and stuff like that. You finally get Disney Plus, and then you learn that you have to stream it weekly. It's just, I am so sorry. That stinks for you. I'm so sorry.
Unfortunately, don't get us wrong. The Mandalorian is definitely worth the wait one way or the other. But in this exact moment in history, you would think that having the ability to stream an entire season of a show that released multiple months ago in a different territory of the world, you would think that would not be the case. But that's what it is. So yeah,
Money.
It just basically comes down to that. The one thing I have to say is, so I'm guessing they probably have the same 7-day free trial over there as they do here. So maybe the intent is they don't want to launch it with all of the episodes. Maybe something could change in the next couple of weeks. Like, let's just say, for example, that the shelter in place or working out of the house, staying away from other people, social distancing, all of that. Let's say it doesn't wrap up as quickly as everyone hopes it would, and it goes way longer, and it goes into maybe the middle or end of April. and that happens. Could they adjust the release schedule? Certainly they could. But it is one of those things where if you are signing up with the trial, they don't necessarily want you to see it. And to be fair, Netflix drops things all the time, full seasons, and they absorb the cost of those people who just sign up for the free trial, watch an entire season or series of something, and then they cancel their subscriptions. But it seems like there's, obviously it's not like Disney, they did not plan the launch in Europe to coincide with what's currently happening, obviously. But there are definitely more people within the world that have more time to sit home and watch things on streaming services. The issue, of course, is that Disney, the way it just happened to land was that their launch date happened to be here. So, of course, they're going to get some criticism one way or the other about the fact that, their top tier show on the service isn't available all at once. But I'm not sure that they could actually just absorb all the cost of anybody who's potentially just tuning in to see the Mandalorian. That's all for the time being. Now, like I said, things could change in the next couple of weeks. We'll have to wait and see.
I get that. And from a serious point of view, I totally understand what Disney Plus is doing. I think it's smart economically, business-wise, but I think it is a little bit distressing from a fan standpoint. However, this brings about a bigger question is, for me, this is a little bit unprecedented because I thought that, if you're launching Disney Plus, which is a global thing, yeah, you have these regions, but for their own streaming service, right, you would launch something globally. I'm curious and speculatory here because we don't necessarily know if Disney Plus drops something in the US, like the first episode of season 2 of The Mandalorian. Is that going to be, delivered in the European market basically at that same time frame? Or is it going to be delayed a little bit? It's just weird that you have this global platform that's not releasing everything globally to all regions at the same time. It's just to me that's what this move spurns, this larger question of, what is Disney Plus's release strategy for like global content when it comes out new?
Yeah, it is definitely something worth discussing too, because the issue is as more and more regions of the world get added, they actually launch with Disney Plus actually launches within them. It does beg that question because we know that as far as their release schedule that they had at least a year ago, April of 2019, when they talked about their worldwide launch schedule, there was certain territories that were not going, or certain regions that weren't going to be getting the service until 2021, 2022, I think. Maybe I'm thinking of something else, but I know that there were some that were as far back as 2021 or as far forward as 2021. So the issue is that presents a problem because how do they release all of these other shows as it goes? Obviously the European market has the disadvantage of just releasing now. There's not a lot of other content that Disney Plus has that has been really top tier content on the service that they have to release. So as we get closer to August and September, when we have the Marvel shows and season 2 of Mandalorian, and we start ramping up with a larger amount of content available on the service, could I see the European region getting the stuff at the same time? Absolutely. I think that it is entirely possible. However, it does beg the question of, well, what happens to those other territories that has not launched? How do you end up having 2 seasons of a show that has yet to make it to that region of the world and somehow release that on a normal schedule while there's an influx of a bunch of other content? I do think that we will get to a point where there's going to be regions in the world that when the Disney Plus does launch, we probably will have full seasons released because it'll just have enough content to warrant that to happen. But unfortunately, the European market, and at least obviously the US, because the US was one of the first regions that got it, that's not the case. So sucks, but it's all about the money, and that's what it is. So, all right. So Quibi, there was only one new thing. As we've previously talked about, T-Mobile is going to be offering Quibi as one of their free options. Turns out very similar to their Netflix deal that they have, where if you have T-Mobile, you can get Netflix every single month for free. And basically the way it works is they just give you a bill credit that is the value of that specific tier of Netflix that they're offering you for free. Quibi is the same thing. However, there's a little bit more details to that, which is that Netflix deal is only good for people who have more than one line of service through T-Mobile. And it turns out the deal for Quibi is going to be the exact same thing. You must have more than one line in order to get Quibi for free. Now, Quibi is right around the corner. They're launching just in about 2 weeks, April 6th. So when they launch, I'm planning on checking it out right away, seeing what there is, and we'll be doing a quick roundup of the service when it does launch, and that first week that it launches. But we'll wait and see. But if you are hoping on getting Quibi for free because you're a T-Mobile customer, just keep in mind that it's the same thing as the Netflix deal where you might have to have more than one line. All right, so there's no news for HBO Max. There's no news for Peacock. There was no other niche streaming services that had news. The last bit of news we have is actually comes from other streaming providers. Fubo TV, which is a cord-cutting service that allows you to watch television over the internet, announced that they are merging with a company called FaceBank. FaceBank is actually a sports AI company. I have no idea. I don't know anything more than that because that's what the press release that I read said. But they are merging with Fubo TV, and their new name of the company will be Fubo TV Incorporated. So I'm guessing they're going to be focusing, obviously, very much so on Fubo TV. There's not a whole lot to that. It just shows that, again, these smaller services, we talked about Tubi being bought by Fox last episode. Comcast has bought Xumo. Viacom CBS, they own Pluto TV. So you've got these different things that are happening, and it just seems like if there is a cord-cutting service out there that's not part of a bigger company, it's only a matter of time before it happens. So, all right, so that's going to get us into our main discussion, and we have a bunch of different updates. So last week's topic was the coronavirus or COVID-19 and streaming, and this week we have a variety of different things that fall in that same category, but they're all different topics within that category. So first up, it was announced that streaming quality was going to be reduced in Europe, and this is from a variety of different streaming services. It first came out that Netflix was having to lower the bandwidth of people watching the streaming services and just things on the internet as a whole was causing some issues with bandwidth across Europe. So the European Union actually asked the streaming services and bigger companies, internet companies, to actually throttle their services so that they wouldn't overwork the system. So as of right now, Netflix, Prime Video, Apple TV Plus, Disney Plus, Facebook, YouTube, they've all throttled their service so that the quality that you potentially are seeing on your screen, if you're in the European Union, is going to be lower than it typically is. And that's because there's just a lot of people watching content right now on streaming services and getting their content through the internet while they're at home.
First of all, the coronavirus is still a thing. It's still disrupting everyone's lives. Everyone's still working from home. The point is, it's the businesses are moving and have moved toward working from home more. And if that's the case, right, if the business is the backbone of the economy, then we need a way for businesses to still function. And so from the European Union, they're looking at it. This move isn't for the consumers that are home who just are just home chilling. This is for the economy to still run, for businesses to still run, for life to continue as much as it possibly can. And that's why this move is coming from. And especially you have like live stream meetings, you have church gatherings going to be shown online, conferences going to be shown online. Like there's going to be a lot more internet traffic just besides people just coming at home Googling more. People are changing their business to be online and streaming other video types of content, other just content in general. There's a lot going on. And so from the EU standpoint, I understand why they asked, but it's interesting how this is not happening in America. I know in Europe, broadband internet is considered a utility, and so those fall under different rules than if it wasn't. So right now in the United States, internet is not a utility. And this was brought up a couple years ago. And according to the research that I did, it's about 6 years out of date. But once again, this is back when like net neutrality was big and they were talking about regulations and stuff like that. So people haven't had a reason to really like do this research again. But once again, 6 years, it's a little bit dated. But America's infrastructure is it can handle this capacity a little bit better than Europe's. It's probably changed by now. They're probably a lot more even and whatnot. And fiber is a big player and stuff like that. that. But point is, it's for the American listeners. At first I was like, well, why would they do that? Like, of course, like, of course there is the capacity to handle it, but it might be that in Europe that's not the case, that the telecoms and internet service providers cannot provide reasonably that quality and that consistency over time, and that's how come they asked to scale back. And so it's a little bit surprising. However, one of the articles, it seemed like YouTube, or was it Netflix, was changing it, wasn't eliminating the HD version. It was just defaulting to standard, so that if you knew where to look, you could probably change it. But that's what the article appeared to me. So it seems like some of these streaming providers are trying to give themselves an out and not really buckle under the demands. That sounds a little bit too harsh of a verb, but they're trying to comply, but also trying to still deliver the top notch quality that they do. And so that was a little bit interesting. So hopefully in real life you can test that. If you're one of those markets where streaming is a little bit throttled, you can check and see. But that's how one of the articles kind of appeared that to be. So you might be able to turn the HD option on, but it just might default to just standard, or it might just be standard all the way. And so, but the point is it's this reduced quality that's in Europe, and it's kind of crazy when you think about it, just how much things have changed and how much serious that they're taking it, and how much the now economy is going to be run on the internet. It's just a little bit amazing how, in this theory that the European Union said, is that they, if we stream too much, we could break the internet and potentially break business in the world. And so it's crazy to think that's how we're at right now. But yeah, that's kind of what's going on.
And then it's just an update on some of the early releases that are actually coming to the services. So last week we talked about how Universal was releasing 3 of their films right away, and then they were going to be releasing Trolls in April digitally right away as well. Right around the same time that happened, we heard word that some of the other recent releases from Warner Brothers were also going to be hitting early. Birds of Prey is not, to be clear, these are all specifically to rent early so you can view them, because you can't view them in theaters. These are not on streaming services. This is not like the situation we talked about last week with Frozen, how that they just moved up the release window for it on Disney Plus to view for free. These are other movies that are available to watch immediately based off of either you can purchase them, you can own them on digital, or you can rent them. So some of the ones that they recently announced, The Way Back, which was a Ben Affleck film, they released Birds of Prey early. There was a film, Bloodshot, which was a movie that Sony released that came out. It was supposed to come out in theaters last Friday and actually released digitally right away as well for people to watch. Disney announced that Onward, which came out in theaters at the beginning of March, was actually made available last week digitally so that you could purchase it, and then they actually announced that it's going to be hitting Disney Plus at the beginning of April as well, which is a huge early release. And then there's a movie that Paramount was supposed to be releasing called Lovebirds. I don't think this movie was actually supposed to come out till June, if I remember correctly. But that movie, they actually decided to pull it from the theatrical release, and instead they sold the rights to Netflix, and it's going to be on Netflix. They didn't set a date at this point, but it will be coming to Netflix. So there, you can see that the different studios are reacting differently. Some of them are pulling the content they got pulled out of theaters, they're releasing it early. Some of them are releasing it early for purchase and then immediately doing the route of putting on their streaming service like Disney Plus has with, or will be with Onward. Then you have services that are just saying, we're going to forgo theatrical issues because of everything that's happening now. It's going to obviously present some issues going forward in the future. Basically, the entire theatrical release slate for April, May, June has been completely disrupted. Warner Brothers has announced that their big films that they had in May and June have been pulled. They've moved Wonder Woman 1984 to August, and the other films they didn't even set new release dates for at this point. There's the James Bond movie moved from April all the way to November. You had Fast and the Furious 9, which moved from May all the way till next May of 2021. So everything is up in the air as far as what's going to happen with a lot of these movies, but that's what's going on. Now, some of the online retailers have actually created a specific place for you to find some of these movies. Amazon has a place that they're calling Prime Video Cinema, which is a place where you can go to find all of these movies that you can watch early that would be normally in theaters, like the Universal ones that they released in, to rent last week. There'll be more movies that'll be added to that as time progresses. Vudu also has something very similar to that, where at the top of their app they have a spot where you can easily click onto it and see some of the films that would normally be in theaters. And as more get added, you'll see more, but as of right now, there was only about 4, I believe, in both of them. The point is, there's a lot of stuff that's having to be adjusted because of the content and the theatrical windows and things like that, which is what we talked about last episode. More specifically, there's been some Hollywood reactions to the theatrical window breaking, and there was an article that we have in the show notes where Christopher Nolan, who's a very famous director, he had written up an opinion piece for the Washington Post talking about how the movie theaters will need help when this is all said and done, because the movie theaters, they are reliant on time and things like this, and when you have such a stretch of time where they can't be used, it presents a larger problem. We were talking about before the show started about, while ultimately the theaters are having some issues, is this a situation where we really do believe the government's going to step in and actually help the theaters out?
This whole moment is just hard to talk about, because at one moment it's easy to talk about this in a abstract point of view, from a being distant and viewing in terms of, okay, what's best for the business and economy and money. And so I don't want to diminish this moment, because there are people losing their jobs. There are people in theater chains that are losing their jobs that are in the service industry, and it's hard and it stinks. And, movie theaters, for me, I still go to movie theaters just because I like to go in those moments in certain movies and just to have that wonder. I mean, I remember seeing, Lord of the Rings in theaters, and just that wonder. The Avengers, the first time when they all assembled in the New York moment, just me and my buddy, we flipped out, and that's just a moment that's going to stick with my mind. And so I'm just seeing how, people won't get to have those moments, especially right now with the stay-at-home orders and, potentially the theaters closing, and just a bunch of stuff that's happening right now. That's a little bit sad. So I don't want to diminish job loss and moments lost and stuff like that, but it's just a lot. I think it's smart by movie studios to postpone releases of big budget films, because people are like, yeah, just push like Wonder Woman 1984 to the DC Universe app or HBO Max or something like that. And it's like, it's going to be a great boom with subscribers, but that subscriber revenue is not going to cover the cost of a north of $200 million big budget movie. Like, they need theater revenue to help offset that. You just can't get that through subscriber base alone. So I think for postponing big budget films, it makes total sense. For other films, it does make sense that they would just drop it, as soon as possible to, okay, we've created it, it's sitting on the shelf to go to, a theater, but obviously people aren't going to theaters, so it makes more business sense to just drop it early, screw, home video sales or something like that, to drop it to a streaming service of some sort. That makes sense. From that business perspective, I get that they have these movies and they want some value of return, so you do the math. I think Trolls is a little bit interesting, and it's funny hearing, just reading the article the Hollywood Reporter will put in the show notes of one of the theater owners' chief just rails against Universal, and it's funny. The article's not necessarily funny, but it's I find it quite comical. You read it and it's a good interview, but you can feel the rage of the theater chief of against Universal right now, and that's just a little bit funny. It's hard because movie studios, they're not going to be, if the stay-at-home order is for a very long time, right, I'm talking about for the rest of the year, then I think that's when they can still really, really feel that pressure. But theater chains are feeling the pressure right now, and I think movie studios have a lot more in the coffers to really handle this moment, and they have a bigger buffer than theater chains, and so they can withstand a longer pause in production. So I think that because of this, and I think that and once again, I'm not a doctor, I don't know infectious disease, but the projections and people are saying it's supposed to be done, in a few months' time, things are going to be back to quote unquote normal. Who knows if that's going to stay or not. 2 episodes from now, Tony's going to be like, dude, you're just dumb. But the point is if that's the case and things are currently the way they are, then I think that, movie studios are going to upset the balance of power. The movie pipeline, the movie economics, and theater chains are going to have a smaller role. I think that they still have a role. I think that they're important, and I think that they are going to be more luxury, but not in a like a super high fashion point of way. But it's like they're not going to be as crucial to movie success as they are right now. And I think that's going to be permanent. I think that we're in the middle of this change. And I think it was a slow change with the rise of streaming, and people have been talking about it, hinting it, what if, but the coronavirus, it's really challenged the norms. It's challenged what we know. It's challenged how we do business. And I think streaming is going to be bigger. I think people are going to drop this as soon as possible. I think in the last episode, I predicted that you're going to have studios drop content, not necessarily on like the streaming platform to like binge watch immediately, but to rent at a premium price and, $20 or something like that. And if you do the math, they're going to get higher returns, higher profits from dropping it digitally than, home video sales or something, just due to spending money on physical media and the shelf space and just other stuff. And so they can get a higher cut of that. And if that's the case, then why would they change? If this coronavirus, if you want to view it as an economic experiment, once again, I get what's going on. But if they view it as this economic experiment and it's proven to work, then I can see this balance of power. I can see this change. I can see a new normal being grown. But it's once again, it's just hard. It's hard, because you were talking before the air of how you love James Bond, but it sucks just to see how that's now postponed back to November. And it's just there's going to be a new normal. And no matter how you read these articles, I think it's clear that at the end of the day, when things are said and done, when we get back to normal, whenever that is, it's going to change.
And I definitely agree. I don't think that when this is all said and done, there's a lot of changes. And the streaming industry is obviously what we focus on here. We've been talking a little bit more about the entertainment industry with the theaters and things like that, because it could eventually impact, the streaming industry as a whole. And that's why we've been talking about it. But I think that there's a lot of industries that are going to show they're going to be changing, and we're going to see a lot of change in, the service industry. There's probably going to be a lot more restaurants that will be offering delivery after all of this, because they've had to adapt and they realize it's not actually that difficult. So delivery could be a much more common thing. And I'm not trying to say that it's not a common thing already, but I think that there's probably plenty of restaurants out there who have, maybe tried to stay within their normal range of doing things, and now they're going to now they're being forced to do things differently because of how everything is happening, because of what's currently happening in the world. So I think that's one industry. I think the theaters are another one. I think that streaming as a whole, the difference is going to be the content that comes from, but it's going to stem from what's happening in other industries, television production and things like that. A lot of what we typically see is going to, within the entertainment industry could change very much because of what's going on and the potential that something like this could happen again. And why build your company or push your company in a direction where, well, this was just a one-time thing, because you don't know that. And if you can figure out a better way of doing things that might make some people, like the theater owners, upset short term, that might be a situation you have to deal with. But long term, just like these streaming services as a whole, short term, a lot of the companies were quick to be like, well, it's not a big deal. We're just going to license our content that nobody watches anyway to Netflix, and no big deal. And then a decade goes by, and now suddenly everybody wants to have their own streaming service. All these major entertainment companies are trying to do the same thing that Netflix was getting laughed at doing, 10 years ago. So I think that ultimately we're going to see changes across a lot of different industries as a whole. Some of the other quick updates: Prime Video is offering free children's programming during the crisis. They have a group of content. This is not just in the US, this is also over in Europe as well. The content is going to be different in the different regions, but they're offering a wide variety of content. You don't need to have a subscription to Prime Video, but you do, however, have to have an Amazon account. So you just have to go sign up for an account, and you'll be able to have access to a variety of different content. I'm not going to say a ton of content, but you'll have a variety of content at your fingertips for your children to be able to watch for free. There was also an interview, I'm just plugging it real quick, we're not going to really go into it. The head of content, Ted Sarandos over at Netflix, he did an interview, and he was basically asked, based off of everything what's going on, how do you think that production of series and shows is going to be disrupted? And he basically said, immediately in the near future, it's not a problem. Anything that we would be releasing in the next couple months, we've already had. Anything that, it was a little bit further out, so like aiming for fall or something like that, that's the stuff that we, kind of will have an issue with. But this isn't just obviously a Netflix thing. He's just reiterating exactly what we talked about last episode about how everything being halted and production being halted on a variety of different projects, whether it be movies or TV shows. There's productions not taking place means there could be a point in time where there's a lull of content. However, based off of what we were talking about with the movies, we have this lull of content being actually created. However, there's a lull of content being released as well. So everything could eventually just slowly shift, and you'll see things get released in weird times. I mean, the idea of Wonder Woman being released in August is kind of unheard of in the sense of it's a big blockbuster movie. August tends to be, not always, but tends to be a month where not a lot of big blockbuster movies are being released. But that could change this year, and there's still a lot of other movies that still have to get a release date at some point in the near future as well. So the point is, production is going to be slow. I did read some article, not necessarily related to directly to streaming, but I did read an article earlier today talking about how executives at the television studios are actually asking for duplicate pilot scripts so that hypothetically, while there's this lull of time where everybody is at home and can't be out and about, they can either have the writers rewrite a script or have a writer's room virtually work on a script or something like that, so that by the time that everything gets back in place where they can get back to work, they have a variety of different options to go off of, and they're not waiting for these scripts to be rewritten if necessary. So they're reacting as much as they can, but there is going to be a point. I mean, the biggest thing is, I feel like ultimately some of the shows that are some of the new shows that would be coming to broadcast or cable or some of the premium channels or even some of the streaming, any of those new series that haven't been established, don't already have an established production schedule and things like that. I feel like anything like that is not going to be ready in time at this point for the fall premieres. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, I think that this article is just a little bit important to keep in the back of your head. I don't think it's going to affect anything now, but if the stay-at-home orders or stuff like that continue for the long term, I think that we will see more disruptions in film and media production pipelines. And so it's kind of like if this continues, if the current now is happening in the next few months, I can see that there's going to be a content shortage in the near future. But like right now, it's fine. It was a really good informative article by a Deadline.
All right, and then to wrap up the talk about the coronavirus and streaming, I didn't have this in the show notes because I don't have an article specifically talking about it, but the one thing that was just announced is that the Olympics have been postponed from 2020 to 2021. They're pushing the Olympics back completely. Now, how this relates to streaming, of course, is that Peacock was set to launch right before the Olympics, premiered this summer. So I have to wonder what will happen with the launch of Peacock. The entire strategy of Peacock's launch was basically corresponding with the fact that the Olympics were going on, and how as a company, NBC Universal gets a ton of views from the Olympics. So now that the Olympics have been postponed for an entire year, I'm pretty sure by next week we'll have to hear something about what's going on with Peacock, because Peacock was supposed to be launching on for Comcast and Cox customers in April as basically a beta test for the service, and then officially nationally launching for everyone else right before the Olympics. So I'm pretty sure we're going to be hearing something very soon here, because now that it's been officially decided that the Olympics have been postponed, I can only imagine that Peacock is going to kind of be in a position where they're not going to be able to launch with what they have. And as we've seen, based off of the amount of content that's been announced for the service, I'm not sure they have a lot of content that they could debut the series or the service with initially, because they were banking so highly on launching alongside the Olympics. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm sure, like I said, we'll have more to talk about next week when it comes to Peacock. All right, I'm going to I want to get into the secondary discussion that has nothing to do with the coronavirus, not because that's obviously not something that's very big and happening right now, but we've had the secondary discussion for a couple of weeks, and obviously we've pushed it to the side, and it's not a discussion that requires a ton of time to cover, so I want to really quick cover it. So a couple of weeks ago, I hinted at what it was about. It was basically, there's a article that popped up on the Hollywood Reporter. This was basically at the beginning of March, where they said that NBC Universal has quietly sold their stake in Snapchat. They had a stake of $500 million. They have sold it. And the real takeaway from this article is not so much about how NBC Universal sold their stake in Snapchat. It's more about the fact that in the article it lists off a number of different companies, Comcast being one of them, who owns NBC Universal, a number of other ones, AT&T. They have all slowly divested in a number of smaller acquisitions that they've had recently to basically raise some money within the company. And it was interesting to see because almost every company that was listed in the article has a streaming service planned at some point or is already launching one in the very near future because they already have a launch time frame. Viacom CBS said that they were looking at offers to sell their Simon & Schuster publishing business because they're looking at also potentially using the funds that they get from that along with the potential of selling the CBS BlackRock headquarters. That money could bring in about $2 billion. And if they could use that $2 billion to basically help finance the streaming service that they're looking to create, that's exactly what they would do. Disney, they've spent a ton of money on Disney Plus and Hulu. Last year, they sold off Foxnet, which is a video game development studio, and that was a low nine-figure deal. So that was, low nine figures could be, $100 million. So AT&T, they sold their stake in the game show network to their partner Sony Pictures Entertainment for over $500 million as well. So it was interesting to see this article mention how all of these companies who are launching streaming services, who we all know are spending a ton of money for these streaming services, they're slowly figuring out ways to sell off stakes that, are $500 million and that you can only imagine. And obviously the article does not explicitly say that the money from the sale of any of these companies or the stakes in any of these entities that they have is directly going towards funding the streaming service. But one can only imagine that that's the case because every single one of these companies, their main focus currently is the streaming side of things. So I thought it was something worth mentioning. Did you have any thoughts about the article?
Nothing necessarily new. I didn't know that they had all these stakes, but I understand why they needed to raise capital. I think Hal Vogel he's quoted in the article, CEO of Vogel Capital Management, basically describes what we've been saying this whole entire time, that streaming takes a lot of upfront capital costs, and it takes a long time for it to be profitable. So yes, you see all these subscriber numbers and Disney's doing great and this and this and this, but they're still losing revenue, and it takes a lot of money to even start the service. And once you get going, it's going to be fine, but it takes a lot of upfront capital. And a lot of these companies have a lot of corporate debt. It doesn't get talked about a lot, but in the US, there's a high rate of corporate debt. Obviously, you don't want to add more to that if you don't have to. So selling off and divesting stakes in these different businesses that don't necessarily fit into their portfolio, it makes sense, and it totally makes sense. Netflix, they actually raise capital in a little bit different way. I texted you. This is not really streaming related, but it's more economics. They actually deal with junk bonds, and that's how they raise some of their capital for the content push that they do. And so companies are trying to avoid as much debt as they can. It's kind of like selling off a big purchase. It's selling off something big to basically put a down payment on a house or a car. That's kind of what these purchases are. There's still a lot of money that they're putting in, and these sales don't cover the costs, but it's kind of like a good down payment. This article was released March the 9th, and for the record, if you haven't been paying attention, as of this recording, the stock market fell by a whole bunch since March the 9th, so it's probably a really good idea that these companies sold their stock to raise the money, because right now their investments would be significantly less off. So just to put that out there, timing was a little bit fortuitous. So
all right, so that is that secondary discussion. I apologize for not getting to it the last couple episodes. We just didn't have the time, and we had the time this time around.
The global pandemic just comes first.
Yeah, unfortunately, that has been the focus of the news. And while it is obviously definitely a serious thing, it is basically taking over all of the news as a whole, because as you can see, we didn't even have that much news to actually discuss this week around. So to round out the episode, there is a number of trailers. You can definitely check out all of the trailers that have released. I've started to pay attention a little bit more to some of the niche services, so you're going to start to see some other services that we weren't covering trailers from before, such as Crunchyroll or DC Universe or Crackle, Acorn TV. There's a bunch of different trailers, so you're probably going to see an extended amount of trailers either posted in the show notes, or if you follow us on Twitter or our Discord, you're going to start to see other trailers from some of these other services, because they are producing original content, and there's no reason the content shouldn't get as much focus as the content on some of the bigger services. So with all of that being said, I want to encourage you guys to follow us on Twitter and join our Discord to check out all of the latest news articles that we talk about here on the podcast and some that we don't. Follow us on Instagram for all the latest announcements related to new episodes of the podcast releasing. You can send us an email at thestreamingwars@gmail.com with any questions, comments, concerns, topics you'd like us to discuss on future episodes. We're always greatly appreciative of any feedback we get from you guys, including any feedback leaved either on any of the podcast platforms or on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the show itself. So with all of that being said, for Tony and myself, this has been the Streaming Wars, and continue to stay safe out there.
Thanks for listening to the Streaming Wars. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Links can be found at thestreamingwars.io.